mangoes are really good. They flavor things really
Okay.
nicely. That's something you want to get a riper one.
Dr. Matt Letterman and his wife, Dr. Alona Pulde, are among a small but growing number of physicians who use a whole foods, plant-based diet as a primary treatment for their patients. From shopping with patients to teach them how to read nutrition labels.
And I don't care what it says on the front, the back, or the sides.
Look at the ingredients, okay.
And that's all I care about.
To showing patients how to prepare meals. They are not your typical MDs. Doctors Letterman and Pulde use food as treatment because they feel it's the best medicine available. Medicine that not only makes their patients feel better, but that truly improves their health. In 1973, the U.S. Congress passed a new farm subsidy bill. Among other things, it included incentives that encouraged a massive increase in corn production. One of the major byproducts of this enormous corn surplus was a low-cost sweetener called high-fructose corn syrup. Companies could add this sweetener to anything from soda pop to hot dogs, and then make these products widely available at low prices. Processed sugars and other refined foods are far more calorie-dense than the whole plants they're made from. The dramatic increase in their use is a major reason why our food has become richer. To evolutionary psychologist and author Dr. Doug Lisle, the consumption of unnaturally dense foods is the main cause for the epidemic of obesity in America.
It isn't that people become more self-indulgent. It isn't because they're lazier than they ever were. What's happening is that their mechanisms of satiation are being fooled.
The process starts with a range of receptors in our stomachs that help us gauge how much food we've eaten. These include stretch receptors to help measure the sheer volume of food in our stomachs. We also have density receptors to help determine the caloric density, or what we more commonly call the richness of our food. For instance, 500 calories of natural plant food fills the stomach completely, triggering both our stretch and density receptors to signal our brain that we've had enough to eat. But 500 calories of unnaturally rich or processed food fills the stomach far less, deceiving these receptors into telling our brain that we need to eat more. Even worse is 500 calories of oil, which is almost pure fat and barely triggers any response at all.
The problem with weight management in humans is that if you make these foods completely artificial, which we do today, you wind up with a problem that people have to overeat just to be satisfied.
But why do these concentrated foods that are so harmful to us give us so much pleasure? Dr. Lisle says the answer is related to a system called the motivational triad. This is a trio of biological mechanisms that nature has designed into every creature on Earth so they can survive to pass their genes on to the next generation. The first leg of the motivational triad is pleasure seeking.
And primarily two things are the cause of that, and those two things are food and sex. So in the case of a great white shark, it's basically got a neon sign flashing across its forehead saying food, sex, food, sex, food, sex. Unless it's a male, then it says sex, food, but it's pretty much the same thing.
The other two legs of the motivational triad are avoiding pain and doing everything with the least amount of effort.
Pleasure-seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation, that really sums up animal behavior, whether we're talking about a paramecium under a microscope or a great white shark.
Richer foods naturally excite our senses because it's nature's way of telling us they will provide the highest amount of dietary reward with the least amount of effort. This helped our ancestors find the most calorie-dense and ripe foods available, which contributed to our survival. But in today's environment, we can artificially increase calorie density well beyond what our ancestors would have found in nature. The resulting foods give us a hypernormal amount of pleasure, leading us into something Dr. Lisle calls the pleasure trap.
What the pleasure trap is an interaction between our natural instincts, which are trying to tell us the right thing to do, and some kind of artificial modern stimulation that is piggybacking or hijacking that process. So the classic example of the pleasure trap would be drugs and drug addiction. The way drugs work is they hijack the existing pleasure circuits. When certain chemicals hit those areas, they cause feelings of euphoria and excitement.
The same drug-like effect happens when we eat highly concentrated, processed foods.
We've removed the fiber, we've removed the water, we've removed the minerals, we've done everything that we can to hyper-concentrate sugar and fat. and add a bunch of salt as well into the food. And now what the food has become is become a low-grade addiction.
These things are drugs. They have other deleterious side effects, not the least of which is adding a lot of empty calories.
Dr. Terry Mason is Commissioner of Health for the City of Chicago. He's one of the few public officials in America who openly supports a plant-based diet.
If it walked, hopped, swam, crawled, slithered, had eyes, a mama and a dad, don't eat it.
Dr. Mason contends that the less affluent segments of our population have difficulty making the best food choices.
Well, first of all, the diets are calorie-rich and nutrient-poor. This is the real problem. And unfortunately, poor people are poor in everything. They're poor in health, they're poor in food choices, they're poor in almost every aspect you could think of.
This makes the less prosperous particularly vulnerable to the low-grade addiction of highly processed foods.
People want stuff that's fast, people want stuff that's quick, and they like the stuff that's salty, and they like the taste of something fried. And so those are the kinds of things that you see in our community.
Sandera Nation lives in a quiet suburb in Cleveland, Ohio, with her 5 children. In October 2008, she was stricken by a strange illness.
I want to say something, but it's not coming out. I'm getting really shaky and sweats, and then I'm cold and I'm sick and I'm fatigued and my stomach hurts and everything, so I went to the doctor. And that's when they diagnosed me with hypertension and diabetes.
Like Joya Coyne, Sandera was treated with expensive prescription drugs.
I was in denial for a while. I heard what they said, but I was in denial, like, I still ate things I shouldn't have. I didn't really get the education that I needed to know, so I really depended on that pill to save me.
Then Sandera met with Dr. Esselstyn, who recommended that she treat her illnesses with a whole foods, plant-based diet.
Let's come on in and we'll get to work.
I was a little nervous, but he made it real easy for me. I was real interested in what he had to say and what he was going to teach me in the new journey that I would be taking with him.
After 8 weeks eating plant-based foods, Joya Coyne was still off all his medications.
When I started this, I had all these side effects from medication and from my being so unhealthy. But now I'm getting in better shape every day. I feel more healthy. I very seldom get tired during the day. I just feel so good all the time. This is a scale that I weigh myself on, and it started about 8 weeks ago, way up here around 218, 220. And now it's bouncing between 180 and 185. None of my belts fit. This one here, I actually had to have 2 new holes punched in because I like the belt so much. Nothing fits. I got to go shopping. It's just everything, all my clothes. A good problem to have.
It's been fun for him because I think he's learned, in addition to the fact that he's seeing such great results, that he loves it.
I don't think he'll go back to this old ways. He feels too good, and he likes, I mean, even if he started to go off a little bit, he feels too good, his energy's too good, he looks younger.
And the fact that he would have to go back on all the meds, you know, if he did, I think that that's a huge motivation for him to maintain the lifestyle.
In the mid-1980s, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn was struggling to organize a study on coronary artery disease. His plan was to put a group of patients on a diet of low-fat plant-based foods, along with small quantities of low-fat dairy products and minimal amounts of cholesterol-reducing drugs.
And slowly, over the next 18 months, I got the 24 patients that I had asked for. But the ones they sent me were a little bit sicker than I had thought. These were patients who had failed their first or second bypass operation. They had failed their first or second angioplasty. And there were 5 who were told by their expert cardiologist they would not live out the year.
One of the most gravely ill patients was a 59-year-old speech and communications teacher, Evelyn Oswick.
Ate all the chocolate candy I could eat, ate every donut I could put my hands on. Oh, I just love things like that, a lot of gravy. And then I have had 2 heart attacks before I met Dr. Esselstyn. When I had the second heart attack, the doctor said that I should prepare for death, really, is what he said. And I looked at him and I said, do you really mean that what you want me to do is buy a rocking chair and just sit there and rock away and wait? And he just looked at me and he said, yes, that's just exactly what I'm saying.
Anthony Yen was born and raised in China.
And we were eating typical Chinese cultural diet. A very small piece of meat, but they slice it, and so it was for flavor rather than American style. When you eat a large, great, big piece of meat, which you could easily feed the whole family in China. And we eat a lot of vegetable in China, and we have soup. But once I came to the United States, you find beginning to experience fast food, hamburgers and cheeseburgers, pizza, and I noticed my weight began to gain.
When Mr. Yin was 56 years old, he suddenly experienced severe chest pains.
At that time, I had an open heart surgery. I had 5 bypass, 5. But it was very interesting. About a week later, I felt my chest tighten up again. So myself and my wife went to see Dr. Esselstyn.
I saw every one of these patients myself every 2 weeks for the first 5 years. And at that visit, we would get a full cholesterol lipid profile. We would get blood pressure, weight, and I would go over every morsel they ate.
By using simple foods as the main treatment for his patients, Dr. Esselstyn was bucking a high-tech, high-cost system that was deeply entrenched in both big medicine and big government.
You know, behind my back, I got to be known as Dr. Sprouts. But I guess I've always liked a challenge.
We preheat the oven, got the water going, we just add some seasonings, and then we add the onions and the spinach.
Well, I've never been a morning person my whole life, and but previous to this experience, it had probably been worse than ever, and that entailed needing to get up in the morning and caffeinate myself with Cokes and Red Bulls and stuff like that before I could even think or start to work.
We didn't make the rice noodles, but you just boil them real quick and then throw this on top.
Right. He's actually eating more often, but he's eating the right foods, and he lost weight. So he certainly feels much better that way, and you can tell it in his face, in his neck, in his belly. He's lost a lot of weight there. He also has better energy. He's waking up earlier now. That's great, because we have then some morning time together.
I don't have to carry anything.
You're the doctor.
Sandera Nation's journey to better health wasn't easy at first.
It was a little hard because I've been eating fatty foods and grease and everything 38 years, as long as I can remember. So it was kind of hard to go from that to changing the next day completely. I started a journal for maybe the first 3 weeks. Write down my feelings and emotions, what I felt like, so that other people could know it's okay to feel that way.
Along the way, Sandera had strong support from Dr. Esselstyn and his wife, Ann.
They keep in touch, and they're like, we haven't forgotten about you. And I know they haven't. I really feel here that they haven't. I went to Walmart this day. I had wanted a Subway sandwich, and I said, I'm going to get me that meatball sub. I then received a call while I was at Walmart from Mrs. Esselstyn, as if they knew I was weak at this moment. She stated, promise me you will not eat anything from Walmart. Gave me chills to know that she called at that moment. Therefore, I left the store without getting that meatball sub.
What do you see?
While Dr. Campbell was publishing his China study, Dr. Esselstyn was getting some powerful data from the research he'd started in 1985. He began with 24 patients, but 6 had dropped out in the first year, leaving him with a total of 18.
At the end of 5 years, we had follow-up angiograms, and 11 of the group had halted their disease. There was no progression. And there were 4 where we had rather exciting evidence of regression of disease.
These results were astonishing. The diet produced something that medication and surgery never had before: actual reversals of heart disease. The biological mechanism that caused these reversals centers on the lining of our veins and arteries, the endothelial cells.
They are the absolute life jackets of our blood vessels. You're young and you're a teenager, you're healthy. You could spread those out 1 layer thick and you'd have something that would cover 6 or 8 tennis courts.
In 1988, scientists discovered that endothelial cells manufactured the gas nitric oxide.
Well, what does nitric oxide do? Nitric oxide keeps our blood flowing smoothly without being sticky.
It also helps to dilate constricted blood vessels during physical activity and inhibits the formation of plaque.
And most importantly, nitric oxide is a powerful force for eliminating the inflammation that seems to go with this plaque.
However, scientific tests have demonstrated that when we start eating the typical Western diet, our endothelial cells are damaged.
When you're getting to be in your 40s and 50s and 60s and you've been slaughtering your endothelial cells, you don't have those 6 or 8 tennis courts. You may be down to 1.5 or 2, and they can't protect you.
Yet according to Dr. Esselstyn, when we begin eating a whole foods plant-based diet, the damage to our endothelial cells not only stops, it starts to reverse.